Do you have any idea how many successful entrepreneurs who've had what other people would classify as setbacks? Car accidents, infertility, immigration, addiction. The list goes on and on. Any idea how many successful entrepreneurs have turned those things into an unfair advantage? This is the Unfair Advantage. Turning life's challenges into your secret weapon for success. Life throws curveballs. They're not setbacks, they're setups for success. We dive deep into the lives of amazing entrepreneurs who've embraced their struggles, turned them into strengths, and built kick-ass businesses. And it's not about dwelling on past mistakes, it's about moving forward, building resilience, and creating success despite all the odds. Before we jump into these incredible stories, a big shout out to Brad's agency, ScreamingCow.com, where we turn dreams into digital realities. Let's do this. This is the Unfair Advantage. And now your host, Brad Starnes.
And we're back with another episode of the Unfair Advantage. I am your host, Brad Starnes. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Mr. Matt Strong, who is a franchise owner of Sit Means Sit Dog Training. Matt was born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. His early exposure to his father's businesses are what brought the early onset of his entrepreneurial spirit. He transitioned into the mortgage industry after a career-ending injury in football, where he then managed and owned several mortgage companies. He pivoted into the energy industry during the economic downturn in 2008, where he then built a successful business in the energy sector. Shortly after that, he encountered the founders of a dog training company, which then led into him purchasing a franchise and building his own dog training business. Since then, he now has a business with multiple locations and 32 employees. He is committed to his continuous personal and professional growth. But prior to us diving into this with Matt, I want to remind everyone that today's episode is sponsored by Screaming Cow Marketing Group, which is a full-service marketing agency that specializes in helping service-based businesses grow more leads through utterly unforgettable marketing. Finding a marketing agency who cares about your business just like its own is like finding a needle in a haystack. So if your business is looking for more business to do, you can call the guys who moo. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brad. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned in your intro that kind of your journey getting into being an entrepreneur came from your dad. Kind of the same thing for me. I remember looking at a pic a couple months ago when my wife and I were choosing out photos for our wedding, that there was a pic of me and my dad in his Mac Tools truck. And like, that was one of his first businesses. So kind of interested as what that was and how that got you into being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So my dad was always, I think he's the creative type. I think he'd be called the visionary. The book by Gino Wickman, Traction, resonates with me because being a dreamer and then connecting those dreams with an actionable plan is where I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle. Yeah. And that's certainly where my dad got stuck a lot. And, you know, I'm learning, and it's this pivot that you're talking about in the Unfair Advantage, that there's a lot of lessons to be learned in that. And for me, looking back to what I've learned to do later in life is to take away the really good things I've learned. I think a tendency for people to do is to say, oh, I didn't have the dad that I wanted, or I didn't have the childhood that I wanted, and therefore that's why I'm stuck where I am, or why the story is the way it is for me. And so as I kind of changed that and made a pivot in how I thought about my experiences with him, I looked at the things that he taught me. And really kind of funny, I wasn't even thinking about this until you just asked me the question, but when we first moved back to Maryland, the East Coast from Missouri, and you know, heck, I don't know if you grew up in Missouri or spent a lot of time out there. So I had grandparents in Kansas City. I had great-grandparents in St. Louis. We lived in a little town called Warsaw, Missouri. I don't know if you know Warsaw, but man, I drove through Warsaw probably a year or so ago. First time in 35 years I'd been there. And not much has changed. Not much has changed at all. I was actually thinking to myself, man, this was a really good decision of my parents to move us back to the East Coast in Maryland. And so we moved there for opportunity. And my dad had a welding business in Missouri and had his own line of wood stoves. He called them Frontier wood stoves. And I remember he was super proud of that. Lot of he's very creative. He's kind of an artist. And the welding business out there was a lot of repair work, but I think doing something like designing his own line of wood stoves, I think was good for his soul. And so when we moved back to Maryland, he tried to get back into welding. And man, it was like $10 an hour or less, and you've got a family of 4. And so it was impossible to make ends meet. So my dad started selling Electrolux vacuum cleaners. And he took me with him. And so 14 years old, we're knocking on the doors. I knew the whole, spiel that they go through of how to get in the door. And, we would trial close or pre-close, where we would dig some dirt and try to close. And then if they weren't ready to buy, then we'd dig some more dirt and just keep rinsing and repeating that cycle. Yep. So, but in giving credit where credit is due, the hard work and the tenacity and the perseverance that he had to be able to go door to door, and that's a tough way to make a living. Lots of rejection, lots of no's, but to be able to support his family, did that for a bunch of years when we first came back from Missouri to Maryland.
Okay. Yeah, it's so we're obviously talking about our dads and everything like that. So my dad actually grew up in Fort Lauderdale. Cool. I question to this day why I'm obviously very thankful I'm on this earth and all of that. But he met my mom in Fort Lauderdale, and she was from St. Louis. She was down in Fort Lauderdale for a couple of years. And I question to this day how he let her convince him to move us up to Missouri, just because of, like, right now it's 35 outside. It's a little cold, and I'm sure it's much, much warmer down there. So, but yeah, he definitely had a lot of that. I'd say less now, but more so back then, was more of that visionary as well, where a lot of here's the idea, not as much the execution side of things, or knowing how to put kind of like the right things in places on there. So, and then, so you had mentioned in yours, you guys were doing kind of door to door. And then I know kind of prior to this, you and I were talking about at one point you had left home and then kind of dropped out of college and all of that. And part of that, you said, is kind of built into who you are and on your entrepreneurial journey and everything, and really kind of touching on that with the unfair advantage. Would you mind kind of sharing a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, sure. And I haven't talked about any of that in a very long time. I would say that when I was younger, I probably talked about it too much. It was a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I probably still is a little chip on my shoulder. I think more in a positive way, though, more of like, this digging deeper to have this tenacity and this perseverance that you're talking about to get through hard stuff, because you've been through hard stuff previously, and you also know the outcome of that is that you're stronger for that. You're better. You've learned from those experiences. So I mean, just to not to go too deep into it, I was actually removed from the home by social services. Lived in a foster home for a few days, taken out in the middle of the night. Yeah, man, that's a pretty scary feeling to go into a new environment at 14 years old with other kids there, other foster kids there, and foster parents. And boy, that was bizarre. And my grandparents found out, they lived here in Maryland. They found out that I was in this foster home. And so, they petitioned the court that I could live with them. I lived with them for probably a year and a half or so. And, I was an angry kid. I was just in a bad place, And so in fairness to them, I think I was a lot more than what they bargained for. They'd already raised their kids. They had a son that had special needs. He had pretty severe cerebral palsy. And so even their son, Scott, who was actually in an institution, was pretty upset that I was living with them and that he couldn't live with them, that he was in an institution. He was much older. He was, he was probably in his 30s at that time. But so it caused a lot of friction with them. And so
Yeah.
I ended up just moving in with a buddy that I played football with. So I was a ward of the court, got a few $100 a month to, wherever I lived to pay for some food and some clothes, and really just started making my way. I remember teachers saying, "Hey, I want to talk to your mom or your dad." And I was like, "Here's my phone number. You can call me." Right. And
Right.
kind of flippant as a young man. But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is you weren't going to call and talk to my parents. You were going to call and talk to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, the high school was a little bit of a roller coaster for me, ups and downs. I did very, very well in school at times, getting academic awards. And then there were other semesters where I barely even showed up, barely passing
Yeah.
grades. So it was a very tumultuous time for me, for sure.
Absolutely. And then you had gone off to college, and then wound up not finishing college
Yep.
after that. So I was we have an episode airing next Tuesday. And I was talking with that guy, and like I went to college,
Yeah.
always having this itch to be an entrepreneur, like knew that this was the path I was going down, but wasn't 100% in on being an entrepreneur at the time. And so I um, I joke that it cost me 90 grand in debt to meet my wife, because like that was the best thing that came out of it. Yes, I have a degree and all that stuff, but that was the best thing that came out of it. So um, was that kind of part of the reason why you had dropped out? Like you went in and realized it wasn't for you? What was all that about?
You need a foundation. And I know you mentioned the involvement that you have with your church and the community and your
Mm-hmm.
faith. And I didn't really have any of those things that were foundational to help a kid get through stuff when I was younger.
Yeah.
And so literally the folks that I were living with, they packed up my duffel bag, dropped me off in the front of college. I had no money for school. I was taking loans for whatever I could get, financial aid for whatever I could get. And literally I got dropped off at football camp in the middle of Washington, D.C. And
Wow.
man, I was just lost. I didn't know where I was going to live. The coach didn't know where I was going to live. He's like, "Oh, we'll figure it out." And I'm living in the city, and there's these giant rats, and they had us in this old abandoned hotel. And I was like, "This is not me. I'm getting out of here." And so I left. I worked for an electrician for about a year. Always wanted to get back and play football. My parents didn't let me. I wasn't allowed to be involved in activities like sports when I was living with them. And so when I left and I was in high school, I just wanted to do everything. I wanted to play baseball. I wrestled. I played football. Anything I could possibly do, I wanted to do because I loved athletics.
Yeah.
And so I still wanted to get back and play college football. So I went to a program in Western Maryland, Frostburg State University, and started going to school there, went a full year there, played on the football team. And that's when I told you in the bio, I had a pretty serious injury. I didn't know how bad it was at the time, but ended up having to have a hip replacement
Oh,
because of
wow.
the injury. And, I was about 19 years old, I guess, Brad. And I had been trying to patch up things with my mom and my dad and reached out to them. And my dad had a business then. He was a mortgage broker. He was a single man operation, and he was struggling in his business, and he was practically begging me to leave school. He's like, "Son, please come help me leave school." And so I'd done some work for him, like courthouse research type stuff. And he's like, summer came, the semester was over, and he's like, "Please stay and help me with the business." And so I did. And so I had, at that time, I guess I probably had, I don't know, probably like 30 credits, something like that. When I decided to leave school and help my
Yeah.
dad.
Wow. We right now we're just airing like the audio and everything, but for everybody who's listening, as Matt was talking about, like going off to college and not knowing where he's going to live and the rats and everything, like there is probably the biggest smile on your face about it. And it's like at the time, you probably did not at the time, but looking
No.
back, you're like, yeah, it sucked at the time, but this has helped build who I am and everything like that. So you kind of went into what I was going to chat about next, was how you got into the mortgage industry. So did you eventually open up your own mortgage business after working with your dad, or did you wind up taking over his business? How did that work?
Yeah, so I worked with him, and the same problems that we had when I was a young man persisted into my early adulthood, and we just weren't meant to work together. And I did a lot of good stuff for his business that I was proud of, helped him a lot, learned a lot of pieces of the business because he was relying so heavily on me. I learned every phase of the business, from underwriting to processing to marketing to selling. Like, I learned the whole business soup to nuts. And so I left his business, went to work for another broker for a short period of time. I was 21 years old, had a girlfriend in high school, and her cousin had inherited I think he inherited like $20,000, something like that. And so he and I met at a party or something, and he's like, I got $20,000. And I was like, I know how to start a business. And he was like, all right, let's do it. So we did it. We opened up in a little suburb of Washington, D.C., Silver Spring, Maryland. And we started our mortgage company. I was 21, and
Wow.
I had built a relationship with an attorney. And I was so proud of that day when I got issued the banking license from the Commissioner of Consumer Credit, because I had nothing. And you have to post like bonds and all this other stuff. And it was totally just relationships that I had built in a very short period of time, people that believed in me. And, I felt like I always have these utopian moments. I know you shared coming to Christ as part of your journey. And, that happened early on in my marriage. I actually attribute that to saving my marriage of 24 years now. And, so it's funny because I think back to that whole experience that we had, and it was insane. Like, we were burglarized 3 or 4 times. It was, what I was going to say to you is that I thought, oh man, the rest is history now. Like, we're going to be successful. I'm going to be a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I appreciate about your podcast and others, I think of Andy Frisella and his podcast and his book on mental toughness, is he's not out there saying, hey, this is an easy path. He's actually out there saying, like, this is really hard. And so a lot of the gurus are out there saying, they present themselves as superhuman, right? And so I think to be relatable and to help people, and that's the purpose of your podcast. And I hope that, somebody listen to this, they'll find some benefit in my story as well. We have to be real, and we're living in an AI world where everything is generated that's, it's this perfection, but really the human part is the imperfection, right? And so I realized that even though I got that banking license and I thought I'd be a multimillionaire and all this stuff would, I had arrived, that's what I thought, 21 years old. I'm like, I'm arrived, I'm going to be rich and all this stuff. I had no idea, Brad, what I was doing. I had no idea how to run a business, how to lead people, had no idea how to lead myself, much less lead people, and, here I am at 50 years old, still trying to learn that, but I'm a little farther along than I was at 21.
It's funny you say that, because so I had a business prior to this. It was a fintech company, and it was me and my 2 best friends that had opened it up. And I don't know if it was the business license or what it was, but we were just so amazed by it. We were like we made it, and then we got this small office that my bedroom that I'm in right now, that's my home office, is probably bigger than what that office was. And there was 3 of us crammed in here, and we had a whiteboard, and we're going around each other to be able to draw on the whiteboard and all that. And we had thought yes, this is going to be huge. We're going to make a ton of money, this and that.
Yeah.
And obviously for us, that did not happen, but just so young and naive, but that ambition was there. That drive was there, and all of that. And it's crazy looking back, and your comment about I didn't know how to lead myself or lead people and everything. There was at times I thought I was the best co-founder that could be out there, this and that. And then there's times that I look back, and even now they are still kind of that chip on my shoulder in a way that I was not the best at leading them. I remember right before they had departed, because they had departed a couple months before I had then closed down the business is I remember we were on a call on Zoom, and I just like lost it on them. And then I realized that I lost it on them because of me, not because of them and what they're doing. It's like a true leader would realize that in the moment and um, engage their people in a different way than I did. And so just looking back, you look at those mistakes and everything, and like that right there has definitely helped define and develop who I am and my business now and all of that. So so yes, so then coming off of the mortgage company, did that work out? Did it not work out? What happened with that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I made a lot of money over the years. I was in this. I've since listened and read about a similar place where you make pretty decent money, and then but you're living at a higher level. You buy nicer cars, you maybe buy a boat, buy a bigger house, go on more vacations, do whatever because you think you've arrived. And that was another big mistake that I made early on because it went on for years. I did very, very, very well, but I could have been much further ahead in life if I would have. Discipline applies to many areas of our life, many, many, many areas, and it includes finances as well. And you cannot be successful without discipline. You can't do it. And the good news is it's something that you can develop and cultivate. And I'm in that process of doing that. I see you've got Atomic Habits back there.
Yep.
That's a good one. But I'm in that process. And so did that for a bunch of years. I did a lot of cool stuff with marketing, actually, back when they had yellow pages and newspapers and radios and TVs and all the things that we used to do for, what they used to call traditional advertising. I don't even know if that's considered traditional anymore, but prehistoric advertising. But so I did that for a bunch of years. I'm trying to think back. Maybe like 94 or so, I got into that, 93, 94, when I first got the license. And, owned a couple different companies, had a couple different partners, throughout that time. In 2008, and it started in 2007, actually. Man, It was a tsunami in the financial markets. And we sold loans to a lot of investors, and they underwrote our loans. And so we saw this coming like way before the rest of the world, and I think it was like Bear Stearns on Friday. They had a whatever AA bond rating. On Monday, they were bankrupt, right? It was insanity. And so I felt, there's a lot of lessons for me to learn from that. But to be very succinct about it, I'd say, man, I was staring at the train wreck. Like I wasn't working on the things that were the controllables, what I could control. I was focusing on everything external. And I don't know, we had a big house on the water, and I told my wife, I said, we better sell this house and we better sell it fast because this thing is changing, right? And I feel very blessed that we did sell our house, so I didn't have to go through bankruptcy or foreclosure or any of that kind of stuff, which would have ultimately happened if we hadn't been able to find a buyer for it. And had a little chunk of money, but I'll tell you what, Brad, I look back on this journey and I see time periods where maybe it's my mindset, maybe it's my mental state, and I'm sure you can relate to this. I was listening to your first podcast, and it was like I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. I didn't know what direction to go. I doubted myself. I didn't believe in myself. I was embarrassed, humiliated, just a lot of stuff. And I wish that I would have gotten going sooner. But the segue into the energy business was I was in part of a mastermind group. I've always believed in coaching and surrounding yourself with great people. And so I was part of a mastermind group, had a buddy in Long Island, New York, and he jumped from the mortgage industry into the energy business. And he introduced me to a broker in Buffalo, New York. And literally, like, I had a job at State Farm Insurance. I was taking the boys to wrestling practice, and I found out you could sell electricity and natural gas commodities. So while the boys were in wrestling practice, I was knocking on doors. I was just going to every single door. Small business back then, like the lesson, like if you sell commodities, you want to sell like big users. I was selling little tiny users, so it takes a lot longer to get there. But I'm knocking on like pizza shops and restaurants, and I'm just like, let me see your electric bill, and I can save you some money. And so I started doing that, and then it developed into a more sustainable career. I went into that full time, and did stuff with LED lighting controls, then ended up working for that software company in California. They had an energy division. They had a piece of software that sat on top of building management systems to help
Okay.
the buildings run more efficiently. So that was the whole segue into the energy business.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. As you're talking, I was thinking about this post that I made today, that the thing you want will not solve the problem you have. The problem you
I
have
saw
is you
that.
think you have a problem.
Yeah,
And that actually came from a, like mastermind intensive that I went to. I don't know if you know who Mike Kitko is.
I don't know.
But he runs a mastermind called, uh, Inner Wealth Global. And like that is the core of his mastermind, is like you could throw as much money at the problem as you want. Like, yeah, making money is great, this and that. But if you don't have peace inside, like if you don't have inner wealth in terms of what's inside of you, you're not happy with who you are, happy with the life you have, all of those things. You're not happy with your health, all of those things. That the rest of it, like throwing money on the problem, is not going to solve that. And then what I hear through everything there with, the economic downturn and everything like that, that's kind of almost exactly what you went through. Like probably back then you thought the money was more important than you think it is now.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, I had to read that a few times. I saw that post as I was looking at your Facebook page, and had to think about that a few times, but I
Yeah.
like it. It makes sense. Yeah. I'd say for me, I needed to get busy working on myself. That's the
Yeah.
truth. I blamed, so, we talk about this pivot from going from, what we thought was a disadvantage to the unfair advantage, right? And
Hmm.
so, for years and years and years after that, I blamed the economy. I blamed the meltdown on the economy. In
Yep.
It's a little emotional for me, actually, because uh, I don't know why. Because I guess it's just being real. I guess it's just being like really this realization that I need to do the work on myself. And so I can't remember. Let's see, we're 2024, so probably like 2022. I had a friend talk to me about the 75 Hard program, probably in
Hmm.
2021, and I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I might like to do that. Being truthful, like I never drank a whole lot, but being truthful, not being able to drink alcohol in that program, I was like, yeah, I don't want to do it. Right. And I put that off for like a year. And I'm telling you, somewhere around December is like 23rd or something like that in, I think, 2021, I guess. Yeah. I was like, man, if this is the reason that I'm not doing this program, then maybe I have a problem. Right. And so, so I was just like, man, I was just like jumped all into that 75 hard. And I came back from a trip, and I talked to my brother, and I was like, I'm a fraud. I mean, that's how I saw it, is like, I'm a fraud. The things that I would tell other people they need to do with their lives, and the things that they need to work on, and all this other stuff that I'm so eager to tell everybody, like I needed to look at myself, and I needed to do work on myself. And
Yeah.
it took a lot of years to wake up to that reality. I came
Hmm.
home and I told my wife, I said, you know what? I said, I want to apologize to you. I said, it wasn't the financial meltdown. It was me. I didn't manage our money correctly. I didn't manage our business correctly. I didn't do the things that I should be doing. And so I apologized to my wife and said, I take full responsibility for what happened to us after that. We moved out of the house, moved into a smaller house, driving old beat up cars. I mean, you know the deal. I heard you talk about it in your podcast,
Yeah.
and it's very humbling, man. It's, you go from driving an Escalade to a beat up hand me down Chevy Cavalier. It's like, man, working night shifts, driving limousines, doing whatever you can do to pay the bills,
Hmm.
which is what I was doing, and back then I kind of felt this pride about like, oh man, I'm out here grinding, I'm out here doing the work, right? But I still was missing the point that, I think, back to your post about, the problem, I think that I needed to do the work internally. I needed to do the
Yeah.
work on myself first.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, it is crazy how much, like for me recently, that's become, I've become more and more aware of it. And in my episode, I talk about basically me having to sell my vehicle and this and that. And as I was, it was prior to my wife and I having the conversation about me leaving the full time job I just took to then go back into being an entrepreneur again. We had just gone out and bought me a truck again. And I look back now and like going back into growing a business and everything, like you got to cut back on your costs and you got to be very, very diligent. And I had said to her about 2 weeks ago, I'm like, I'm sorry that I even like put the idea to let you allow me to go buy this vehicle when what I should have done is just bought a cheap ass car. And we would have like, there is this accelerator program, this mastermind that I want to join. That's the cost of my truck payment. And I'm like, I can't invest in myself right now because of this truck payment. And if I just would have spent more in investing in myself up front, I can have those things later on. And I'm like crunching the numbers. Like, can I get rid of this and just be upside down to reduce the car payment and everything? It's like, it cost me more now to get rid of the damn thing than it is just to keep it. And so that's kind of the route we're down, but it is, but it's like, almost like life was like, hold my beer. Like I was like, oh yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I kind of pushed the idea that this happened before away. And then it happens again, or like even my wife and I, like we were in a bunch of credit card debt. We got out of it. She lost her job. And then we quickly got not where we were at, but within range of what we were at before. And it's like we could have lived very frugal if we wanted to, but I ignored the fact that she didn't have income coming in, and it's almost ironic that it happened again, and that life was trying to teach me a lesson of like, come on, man, like you made this mistake once before, you're gonna you're gonna do it again. So yeah, so like you went from mortgage to energy to now dogs.
Yeah.
And so I want to I want to really talk about that because that's your business now. I have two dogs. I'm surprised
Yeah, I saw that.
they're
I heard
both
that.
not in
Yeah.
here right now. Otherwise, you'd probably hear some.
Rocky and Ollie.
Yep, yeah. The Rocky's the Boston, and he snores like crazy. So there's a dog bed in my office, and I usually have to like bring him out when I'm on calls because otherwise the audio picks it up. But
Yeah.
interested to see like that business, multiple locations, 32 employees now. Like a few things went wrong before, but it seems like something's going right now.
Man. Yeah. Very fortunate, very blessed. I do tell people it's a God story. Pretty crazy. I told my wife, I said, this company they're trying to find their way in this energy space, but they're an accounting software company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I told her for years, I said, this isn't going to last, right? And, I saw the writing on the wall, and one of my bosses left. He was a really good guy. Another woman that was my boss, another boss, she left. And, I just kept plugging away at it. I had a good salary. I was traveling all over the country, and I was going through airport security in Atlanta, Georgia. I was meeting with one of our big real estate investment trust clients down there, and bumped into these two guys. They had Canine training on their shirts, and I'd always been around dogs. I love dogs, and bumped into these two guys, and one guy said, "Hey, I'm Fred Hassan." The other one said, "I'm Alfredo Rivera." We talked for probably like no more than 2 minutes, maybe less. And I got on the plane and I thought, man, that's really interesting business. And I saw they had franchises available. So I requested more information. And that was sometime in December. I pulled up on my Google Photos and I saw pictures of downtown Atlanta on my Google Photos. Sometime it was like November 19th or something like that. And January 2nd of 2020, my boss called me and said, "We don't need you anymore. We're getting rid of your position." And we were on vacation in Florida, visiting family in Pensacola. And it was a gut kick, it was that kick in the gut. Like It reminded me of when I knew the whole mortgage thing was melting down. It was that, it affects you physically, right? But it was only for a moment. And I told my wife, I said, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to buy a dog training franchise, right? And so I think she cried when I tell the story. And so anyway, yeah, I made arrangements to buy the franchise, went to dog training school. The whole world was shutting down because of COVID. My wife's calling me. She's like, "What are we going to do?" And school was in Ohio, so I drove. There was a lot of people at school that flew, and the airports are getting shut down and nobody knew what to expect. And I'm like, I'm not ready to open my business yet. I'm still trying to learn how to train dogs. And so I literally came back the end of March in 2020. And really, I just say April 1, 2020 was the first day. And it's a shutdown. Like all the businesses are shut down. And I'm like, we're essential business because we had boarding as part of our business. And so boarding was considered essential business. So like I'm rolling down the road, getting cups of coffee with the state police and the local sheriffs. And just, I had this beautiful German Shepherd. He's actually under my feet right now as we talk. And he had the one thing he did really well. So he could be off leash and he could hold it down, and he would hold it down on the side of the road. Like it didn't matter what was going on, trash trucks going by, emergency vehicles. He would just stay there in a down. And so literally I'd put him in a down, and and I'd be in the parking lot and people would come up to me and say, how do you do that? Can you train my dog? And that's how it all started. I started training dogs. We had I had a couple high school people helping me out, and, it just grew. I got my brother to relocate from North Carolina. He came up and helped out in the business. He's a owner in the business now. And, we have 3 locations, like you said. We just had a vision meeting with our company, and we had 32 employees. And we've spawned off a few other owners, which is part of my mission statement, was to help, elevate others. Talking about our faith, one of the things that I felt really moved to do was to make our mission about love, which is honestly, to be honest with you, Brad, that's probably more for me than anyone else. It's a hard thing for me to do. I for whatever reason, it just selfish, whatever, but I'm like, guys, our part of our mission is to love people, love dogs, and serve our community, and I shared the scripture from 1 Corinthians 13, what the definition of love was. It's for doing for others. And so, we try to live that out with our team and our clients and how we do this business. And as a way of fulfilling the last part of our mission with serving the community is we have a pretty robust therapy dog program, and we have plans to grow that even bigger. We have Go Team Therapy Dogs Baltimore. We're working on Go Team Therapy Dogs Wilmington, Delaware. And we have quite a few of our clients that have become, part of our therapy dog program. So they go out into the community and, go to hospitals, hospice centers, elementary schools, whatever, but just ways to give back with our dogs.
That's awesome. My on the dog therapy part, my wife works for the American Cancer Society now, and she does this breast cancer walk, and she's wanting to do like a dog therapy, like meet and greet thing at their breast cancer walk in October. That was one of her ideas and then she's trying to find like partners and everything to help sponsor that event. Because the therapy aspect has been crucial for people who have, not just breast cancer, any type of cancer, and being able to have that emotional support in a way that some may not get. So that's awesome to hear everything you have going on. I was kind of going into this last half of the afternoon. I was dragging a little bit. I've been exhausted, and chatting with you has just absolutely like lit a fire in me for the rest of the day, and
glad to hear that.
Everything like that. So you've obviously been through a lot. You're doing a lot. But if there was kind of something you could give as advice to anybody who went through anything you've gone through with the businesses closing down, childhood growing up, those different things, what does that advice be?
I'll make it short and succinct. One of the many things that I love about dogs is they just teach us so much. They teach us so much, and they teach us about ourselves as well. I think someday I'll probably take the time and just write a book about all the things that dogs teach us. One of the things that comes up commonly in dog training is the rescue story. And we as humans want to latch on to something that excuses us from personal responsibility. And in the dog world, the rescue story is a reason, whatever the rescue story was, and there's bad stories, there's bad things that happen, right? Bad things happen to people, bad things happen to dogs. Whatever that story is, your life trajectory, your life story, your life experiences, the richness, all of the things that you can accomplish and do and so on are not dictated by that story in the past, right? And
Yep.
so for too long, I held on to that idea, which I call a fixed mindset. You know, Angela Duckworth in the book Grit, I think, what's her name? Carol Dweck in Mindset. I think they said that right. It was this aha moment. We are not fixed to this way of thinking or to this way of living because of who we are, how we were born, what color of our skin, whether we have money or not, any of that stuff. Like, that's baloney. And all of that stuff holds you in a bad place. So what we try to do in a loving way from a dog training perspective is try to get our owners to consider the possibility that there's a much better life ahead for their dog, right? And we deal with severe anxiety and aggression and all kinds of other dysfunctional, really bad behaviors, problematic behaviors. And it's amazing how locked into the old story humans are, dog owners are. And so if I was going to give a piece of advice, I would say no matter what happens to you, and, you know, I've had some pretty serious things happen in life and business as a young man, in marriage, all those things. And you always will. It'll happen to everyone. It's only a matter of time, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be defined by that, right? You don't have to be defined by whatever that thing is. You can affect change, but it starts with you. So that would be my advice.
Wow, that's awesome. I as you're talking through that, my youngest sister, hopefully for my case, she's not listening to these podcasts, but she had brought on a dog that every one of us was like, because of his past, because of where he came from, like you aren't gonna fix the damage and everything like that. And just last week, I was over at my parents' house with her, and I'm like, he's a pretty good dog. Like, you did all right with him, and
awesome.
And that's me, who tries to be very forward looking, positive, and all that, just holding on to his past and what he went through. So that is very, very good advice. So for anybody else that's like looking to connect with you, anything like that, what is the best way for them to connect?
Yeah, probably the easiest and most memorable way would be at Matt Strong at sitmeansit.com. There's two S's together there. Sitmeansit.com. Matt Strong at sitmeansit.com. Yeah, shoot me an email, and be happy to hear from anyone that would like to chat more.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody that's listening, we'll make sure we get that email in the podcast notes as well on here. So Matt, thanks again for joining me today. This was a great conversation. For anybody who's listening here, please don't forget to like, subscribe to our podcast. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, hit the button to leave us a 5-star review so we can continue to produce more episodes like this. Lastly, please also share our episode on anything like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, anything you guys do, because I know Matt and I would both love for what he has shared today to be shared and exposed to everybody else. Until next time, this is your Unfair Advantage.
Thanks, Brad. Take care.
Yeah, thanks.
You've been listening to The Unfair Advantage. We're all human. We all make mistakes. But Brad's mission is to turn those into useful tools. Tools that can propel you forward like you've never imagined. He's not an expert, but he's been in the trenches. He hit rock bottom when his fintech company folded in 18 months. And he was knee-deep in the poor me attitude. But you know what? He bounced back. And now, his mission is to help you do the same. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. Visit the website at bradstarnes.fyi. The podcast URL is unfairadvantagepodcast.com. And find Brad on Facebook and LinkedIn at Brad Starnes Official. See you next time on The Unfair Advantage.